Hello and welcome to my channel. This is yet another colored pencil portrait in a series of portraits I'm doing, and this one is of Audrey Hepburn, a classic Hollywood actress best known for her movies Breakfast at Tiffany's and My Fair Lady. The materials, as usual, Faber-Castell Polychromos colored pencils, and the surface I'm working on is a 1000 grit sandpaper. In addition to those, I'm going to be using some blending and erasing tools and some other pencils which I'm going to talk about during the drawing process. Now, as for this portrait and the reference, I picked one of the old black and white photos and I colorized it. I didn't know if there was a color version of it. And now the good thing about that is that it gives you a bit of freedom when it comes to the choice of colors. And for the background here, as you will soon see, I picked some violet and magenta and some other tones. Here at the bottom, close to her shoulders, I started with a slightly darker color, which is called red violet, I believe, in the Faber-Castell range. And I then used some, I transitioned towards the middle with light red violet and used some even lighter colors at the top. So basically I wanted to go a lighter at the top and a little bit darker around her shoulders. I did this on purpose because I wanted to create some more contrast, because the top of her head is going to appear a bit darker because of her hair, and the top of the shoulders is going to appear a bit lighter because the light source is coming from above. So I was hoping I would create a bit more contrast that way and maybe make my subject pop out a bit more. So like I said, when you're working on old black and white photos, the bad thing is that they're not in color, but you can always try to colorize them and experiment a little bit with colors to see if you can come up with something you like. And I think I found a combination of colors that works here. So I like these gentle purplish and violet tones, and I think they're going to go well with my subject. Now, I did a bit of her hair here, and at the top here she has a sparkly tiara. She's wearing a lot of sparkly jewelry in this photo, as you will see. And I started drawing this tiara by putting down some of the darker bits, some of the shadow areas, and then I used a little bit of light gray, and then I worked on top of that with a white colored pencil for the shiniest bits. Now, if you want to to make sure that your white tones are really bright, you might want to avoid putting anything under them. So I just left some of the spaces uncovered with any layers, and then worked directly with a white colored pencil and I kind of worked in between those darker areas which I previously laid down. Now on this surface you can put lighter colors on top of the darker ones, but sometimes because each layer is influenced by the layer under it, sometimes the color may end up being not quite as bright or as dark as you want it to be. That's something you need to take into account. But other than that, I think this surface is great because It's textured, it's rough, and it allows for multiple layers, and it allows for working both from light to dark and from dark to light. In fact, you will see that in this case, or in many cases actually, I prefer working from dark to light. It feels more natural, and it allows me to create more of the effects that I want to achieve in most of the portraits, especially when I'm building up the skin tone, drawing hair and things like that. Now I have to say a few more words about the pencils I'm using, because this black colored pencil that I'm using now is a Kohinoor silky black pencil, not a Faber-Castell black pencil. I've already done some work with a Faber-Castell black colored pencil, but in addition to the Faber-Castell Polychromos, I also like to use these Kohinoor silky black pencils. I think they are some kind of a mixture, and they're a bit darker and less reflective than regular black colored pencils, and they appear a bit darker when I put them on top of other layers. That's one of the reasons why I like using them in addition to all the Faber-Castell Polychromos colored pencils. Now here I started working on some darker tones on her skin, and I'm using a little bit of an unusual choice for skin color, but I'm using this sanguine colored pencil. That's what it's called in the Faber-Castell range. And then on top of that I'm using the cinnamon, and for the lighter, for even lighter tones, I'm going to be using the light beige red, or whatever it's called. So how I normally work is from dark to light, but I also reserve a little bit of the spaces for the lightest areas. So where I know that the part of the face, the part of the skin is going to appear the lightest, I don't like to put down a lot of darker tones, but sometimes I just put a bit of the darker tones first and then work over them with some layers of lighter colors, and that approach actually allows me to minimize the amount of texture when I'm trying to draw smoother faces. Now I'm adding some browns to this here, because you'll notice that I initially used black mostly, and now I'm adding some warmer tones to make her hair appear more brown rather than just really dark. And I'm also adding some of these violet tones in some of the highlight areas, because I want to stay consistent with the overall lighting and the overall combination of colors in my scene. Of course, for the darkest bits in that hair, I'm still gonna leave that black, because I like using a black colored pencil when I do colored pencil drawings. Some people recommend against it, but I think it can work, and it can especially work on a surface like this, where you can actually blend colored pencil, because the material, the surface grinds down on the material, and it allows you to kind of blend that pigment from a number of different colored pencils. Zoomed in a little bit and I slowed down a bit, because I'm now starting to work on some of the smaller details. I'm working on the eyebrows and the eyes. This is going to be a slightly challenging portrait, because she's wearing a lot of makeup and fake eyelashes probably, and her eyebrows are kind of bushy. She was a pretty woman, but she's obviously wearing quite a bit of makeup here in this photo. I'm gonna put the reference photo in the description if you want to check it out and see how I made the adjustments when it comes to colors. Now I'm doing a bit more shading on the left side of the face and around the nose. There's going to be a few nice shadows on her face and neck. These larger, longer shadows kind of help you create that feeling of depth and a more three-dimensional appearance. Now here, because this part of the face is considerably darker than the forehead area, I first use a lot more of that darker sanguine color, which is kind of like orangey light brown, I suppose. I don't know how else to describe it. And then I worked on top of that with just a tiny amount of cinnamon, and on the edge of the face, on the left edge of the face, which is in the shadow, I again used a black colored pencil and a touch of this red violet, which I also used in the background. And I'm blending that simply by layering lighter pencils on top of the darker ones. So even when you're working on regular paper, one of the most common ways of blending pencils was to use lighter pencils on top of the darker ones and sort of burnish the surface of the paper a little bit. A white colored pencil was often used as a blending tool, but you could do the same thing with other lighter colored pencils when you put them on top of the darker ones. And that was a way to minimize the texture that may appear when shading, when hatching and cross-hatching. Now here on the nose I put down the lighter bit first, because the tip of the nose, this is where you will often find some highlights where the skin is a bit lighter. So I put a little bit of that light beige color there, and I may even put some ivory colored pencil just on the very tip. And now I'm working around it with some slightly darker tones, but I'm going to work on top of those with some lighter ones again. So I'm going to go back and work on top of that with some lighter pencils. The mouth is also a little bit challenging because a part of it is in the shadow, and at first I thought that the teeth and the lips appeared a little bit too big, so I just sort of kept refining it throughout the entire process of the drawing, and eventually I think I got it to look close to what they're supposed to look like. But in many cases, when I'm doing these portraits, you will see the likeness sort of starting to appear only near the end of the video. Now I had a little bit of an unusual order of doing things in this portrait. I started with the left side, then went to the bottom of the face, and then, as you will see in a minute, I also did a little bit of work on the neck. So normally you would want to move from one eye to the other, but sometimes I just work in this circular order, and I just find it easier that way. There is no rational reason for that, I suppose, other than the fact that sometimes I just get bored with some parts of the face, and maybe I lack a little bit of focus to draw complex details like the eye and some others, and I just want to move on to some other areas which are a little bit simpler for me and kind of rest while I work. Although I tend to make a lot of short breaks during the drawing process, because drawing portraits can be kind of intense in terms of the amount of focus and attention you need. When you're doing digital drawings and when you're doing computer graphics, It's a lot easier because it's easier to fix mistakes. It's easier to save your work and check it out later if you want to make some adjustments. Here, when you're doing these portraits on paper, you have to be a lot more careful. Not that you can't correct mistakes, of course you can, especially on this medium, but sometimes it can be a little bit difficult. So it's better to get it right at first if you can. So I'm gradually building the skin tone by using a combination of colors, as you can see. And once I finish with that part of the face, because I'm kind of working segment by segment here, as you can see, I also add some touches of those violet colors to the shadow areas because I want to stay consistent with the overall lighting. Now here, this right side of the face, meaning our right and her left side of the face, it is a bit lighter. It appears a bit lighter. There is less shadow here because as you can see, the nose and the head is casting a bit of shadow to the left. So this right side is definitely a bit lighter. That's why I'm moving in with lighter pencils immediately. I used a bit of cinnamon and then some light beige on top of that. But of course that doesn't stop me from going back and refining some parts of the face on the left as I'm trying to achieve a more symmetrical appearance. One of the things that I can recommend when you're doing portraits is keep evaluating your portrait in terms of likeness, and keep stepping away from it, taking short breaks and examining the reference photo. And that way you can make a lot of smaller adjustments, because sometimes a portrait, even though it doesn't really look like the person you're trying to draw, is not that bad. It just needs a few minor adjustments. And this portrait is now in that phase. You can see that it doesn't quite look like the actress, but it's not that far from that goal. And as I'm making some small adjustments to the nose, which appeared a little bit too long at first, and the eyes and the mouth, where it almost appears like she has a bit of an overbite, which I want to correct. So as I'm making these smaller adjustments, you will start that the portrait is starting to look better and better. Now I'm moving on to her clothes and the shoulders. This shoulder on the left is going to appear a lot darker than the one on the right, but I still want to put in some lighter tones and achieve some contrast with the background. And in the background I also added a bit of black to make that contrast even bigger. And now I'm adding some really light colors here at the top of the shoulder to make that part of her body appear round and to make it look like it's catching light from the light source. She's wearing a simple black evening dress, I believe, so it's so the clothes are not going to give me much trouble. The jewelry, on the other hand, is going to appear a lot more complex. Here I finally decided to tackle the other eye, and it was about time, I suppose. And if there are any irregularities or asymmetry, I can just fix that as I go along. And one of the things that I also like to do at the end of the drawing process, I like to look at the drawing in a mirror or flip it in when I take a photo of it, just to check if there are any distortions, because that makes it easier for you to see these things. She has some sparkly earrings as well. I mostly use the white colored pencil there, just with a few touches of black, just to create that contrast. But the necklace she's wearing is going to be a bit larger and more complex, obviously. I'm making some more adjustments to the face, deepening some of the shadows around the eyes and modifying the shape of the eyes. You can see that the whites of the eye are a bit darker, because they also need to have a little bit of shadow, so you can't draw them with a white colored pencil. You have to use a combination of other colors as well as white, I suppose. But I want the catch light in the eye to stand out and to be lighter than the whites of the eye. I'm making some adjustments to the cheekbone area and now the lower part of her neck, staying consistent with the light source, which is coming more from the right side. That's why that side of the face is a bit lighter, and that's why we have these large shadows being cast from right to left. Just making some adjustments on those huge eyelashes, and now I'm just going to do a bit more work on the background, using the same combination of colors that I did on the left. So normally when I do most portraits, I work from top to bottom and from left to right, because I'm right-handed, obviously. This medium doesn't smudge that much, but you still want to be careful, especially when I'm drawing this way. I don't have an easel and I'm recording top down, so my hand is always going to be resting on the desk and sometimes even on my drawing. I blended the background mostly using brushes. I use stiff bristle brushes for that. And you want to make sure that you have a sufficient amount of pigment before you start blending, because if you don't, the brush will kind of reveal too much of the background color of the paper, and in my case it's kind of gray and it's not really what I want. I'm just adding some even lighter tones here and there, and I wasn't happy with the appearance of this shoulder to the left. I made it even lighter, and I added some more details and shadows. Working on this chest area, just working my way around the necklace before I tackle that necklace. I'm going to try to find a way to simplify it. I'm going to use the same approach I did with the tiara and the earring. Kind of draw some of these darker bits and then put some lighter details in between, hoping to create a sufficient amount of contrast so that the jewelry can appear shiny and sparkly. And these are some kind of pearls, whatever they are. The shapes appear mostly round, so I'm assuming that there's some kind of pearls or an imitation or a sort, or maybe even diamonds. I don't know what they are. But the key thing is to stay consistent with the light source and to create a sufficient amount of contrast so that I could sell it to the viewer and make it look convincing enough. The shoulder on the right is going to be a lot lighter. Lots of that light beige color at the top and a bit of cinnamon color at the bottom, but still much lighter overall than the shoulder on the left. Not much detail there. I'm not going to try to invent detail where I don't see it in my reference photo. I'm just going to simplify it as much as possible. I've already done a considerable amount of work on the portrait, and the face itself looks fairly complex, so no need to worry about where the focus of the viewer will go. I kind of skipped over some parts of me drawing that necklace. I hope you like how I did it. I kind of simplified it a little bit, but it still looks like sparkly jewelry, I suppose. And that was the best I could do. making some final adjustments on the face. I think that the portrait came out pretty well. It's looking good. I'm just adding some more shadows here and there, putting down some finishing touches basically. And finally, since the drawing is done, or largely done, I'm going to put my signature here on the right above her shoulder, and that's it, I think. If you like my content, don't forget to give me a like and subscribe, and also check out my other videos. However, if you want to see longer videos and more content, if you want to see full-length videos, real-time footage, you should check out my Patreon. I hope you enjoyed the drawing process, and I hope you like my choice of a subject. I'm going to do quite a few more of these colored pencil portraits, and I'm going to see you in the next one. Bye for now.